Until that is established, a community is not tethered to one place. The present synagogue, seen here, was the fourth building in Leicester used for Jewish worship. For nearly 40 years, the congregation moved from redundant chapel to redundant chapel. Thanks to the Irvingites on 2 occasions who were moving out. In 1897, this building was the first synagogue to be purpose-built, but they still had no Jewish burial ground. When it was finally achieved in 1902, it was a key piece of the jigsaw that makes up the congregation's history. The origins of the Jews in the area began a long time before. Occasional glimpses, like a passing shadow, hint at a short-lived Jewish presence. An early documented mention was in an 18th century history of Leicestershire. Unsurprisingly, it was a peddler. Moses Emmanuel, described as a learned Jew, would pause in his travels to engage in theological argument with a renowned local cleric in the 1720s and 30s. They often debated the 51st and 53rd chapters of Isaiah. The 51st relates to remembering that God will bring comfort to those who believe, and the 53rd is about the suffering servant who was thought by some to be a prophecy of Jesus' coming. Of course, we only know about Moses Emmanuel because of his contact with a Christian cleric. Otherwise, he would remain unseen in history. Newspapers began to appear more regularly in the 18th century and offer other glimpses. The Jewish stereotype is well established by this date. The description of the Jewish peddler, Michael, in this advert matches the contemporary drawing. Long hair, long hooked nose, wearing a brown greatcoat and hat, and carrying his box of goods. Sorry. He had been accused of stealing a valuable hunting hound and taking it away to market. As was commonplace elsewhere, Jewish peddlers were travelling through the region on their way to market towns and villages between the larger commercial centres such as Nottingham, Coventry, and Birmingham. One brave soul, Abraham Samuel, a jeweller and silversmith, opened a shop in Market Harborough with a sideline as a pawnbroker. Once the road to London was turnpiked, Market Harborough had an injection of prosperity. Long-distance coaches were passing through. The travellers had to be fed and housed. The local economy was looking up. The adverts show that the shop survived for at least 18 years and been handsomely fitted out with glass-fronted display cases. He was, however, according to a religious survey, the only Jew in the village. It struck me afterwards that if you fed that description into an AI, a chatbot, you'd get a wonderful illustration of what the shop must have looked like, because it goes into great detail. The evidence begins to increase as the 19th century advances. Marriages are found. Joseph Aaron, a tailor from Halifax, married a local girl in church in 1822. But in 1835, there was the excitement of Leicester's first Jewish wedding, presided over by Reverend Myers from Birmingham. Eleazar Isaac, a jeweller, was first mentioned in 1831 when a stray bull walked into his shop. He had been in business with his brother Joel for some years. He married Leah Abrams from Liverpool. The marriage took place in the upper room of an inn, which served as a function room, and a large crowd of acquaintances and customers was present. There was a band, and dancing continued until the early hours. So although there are just the faintest glimmers of a settled Jewish presence in the 1830s and 1840s, there was a constant flow of travelling pedlars through the town. With the first full census, a family group of Lipshitzes and Emmanuels is recorded at the King's Arms. Amberley, who was actually Amelia, was Esther and Joshua's daughter. The description of the King's Arms as the house of resort for Jewish travellers was how it was styled in a court case. Professor Newman explains that in any given town, a particular inn would be where the Jewish peddlers would stay, keeping their own food utensils separate from those used by the other travellers. And now here is a short commercial break advertising the University of Leicester's online collection of historical trade directories for England and Wales for anyone who has not come across it. You can search by county, by decade, and then search within the selected volume by name, place, trade, or street. If you're lucky, you might find an advert. There's usually an index of the 40 or 50 block ads if you are lucky and have got an advert. This page is the tailors in 1854. The first one in this list is Joseph Aaron, who married in 1822 and stayed in Leicester. And there are two newcomers with little stars against their names, and they've come from London. One was Samuel Harris and the other was Joseph Levy. The next part of the story is another slight diversion. The two clothiers listed in the directory on the previous slide, Joseph Levy and Samuel Harris, were both supplying clothing in the 1850s. Samuel Harris had opened a store in the town centre in the mid-1840s. In April 1852, Joseph Levy, also from London, had the temerity to open a shop, shown in this 1862 photograph, across the road, with an immense stock of ready-made clothing, advising his potential customers that they were not made by prisoners in a jail, but by men who could be called tailors. Samuel Harris, in the face of this, initially countered with a strange advert on the same day, suggesting that the money saved in buying his clothing would pay for a rifle. I'm not sure about that. Then Samuel Harris came over all Shakespearean. Poetry was called into play. We have a poem, Fair May and May Fair, all to do with buying clothes, of course. Then he had an acrostic using his name, Samuel Harris, very enterprising. And then Levy's shop was called Pantechnicon. And you can see it's painted across the front of his shop. And so Harris thought that this was amusing. He would make up a poem called Nothing, a contrast, when he talks about a breaknecknicon as an amusing insult. And so they went on. Through the summer, two grown men hurling insults at each other across the street. They were so close they could stand in the doorways of their shops and glare at each other. As a footnote, you can see the emergence of the opportunity to supply those bound for Australia. Harris promoted his outfits for gold prospectors in late June, and a week later, Levy offered a black cloth three-piece suit, a moleskin suit, a flannel jacket for summer, and a tweed jacket for winter, all for £2.13. Into August, they carry on. Harris first, then September, then there's a pause, perhaps for the high holidays, and finally in December, they run out of steam. Much to the sorrow, I should think, of the advertisement department of the newspaper. When the first synagogue was opened 8 years later, Samuel Harris was the president, Joseph Levy was the vice president, so we must hope they had settled their differences. They perhaps epitomise the problems that can arise in a small congregation. As well as the Harris and Levy families, there was a small number of other Jewish families and individuals living in the town, meeting for prayers in each other's houses. The table highlights the importance of Anglo-Jews from London in the growth. Leicester was well placed on the rail network, had an industrialised workforce, and was rapidly expanding, at this time being larger than Nottingham. The group could manage without a synagogue, but burial was a problem less easily solved. If you could afford it, there was the option to have the body taken to a neighbouring town, such as Birmingham or Nottingham. These are the opening dates for nearby Jewish burial grounds. Railway lines to Birmingham and Nottingham were opened in the 1840s, making transport quicker and easier. The records of the earlier Birmingham Jewish Cemetery, Bethlehem Row burial ground, are incomplete, so we don't know if it was used for Leicester families. Similarly, for the North Sherwood Street burial ground in Nottingham, which was in use until 1869. The photograph there is London Road Cemetery in Coventry, which is in part of a very large cemetery. If you were to go there, you would find from the entrance you have to walk the full length of the cemetery to the furthest corner, where this sad little piece of ground is sited, with the railway line rattling along one side, a new modern urban road, clearway, running across the front, and an electricity substation or something by the side of it, and it's on a tremendous slope. And it was just so sad the way that the graves have been squeezed in. That is just by the way. Inspection of the Witten Road records uncovers Leicester names. The alternative in Leicester was the municipal cemetery that opened in 1849. That was Welford Road. The high infant mortality mentioned by Lee in his recent talk is visible here. The 5 Rosen children in the 2 cemeteries were all the children of Louis Rosen, a Leicester tailor. In a court case in the 1880s, he was fined 10 shillings, 50 pence, for refusing to have his child vaccinated. He said in his own defence that he had lost 5 children due to the after effects of vaccination and was not willing to agree to it. And this is the municipal cemetery at Welford Road, which opened in 1849. Leicester, as a stronghold of nonconformity, had about half of the new cemetery designated as unconsecrated, that is, not consecrated for Church of England burials. So all the areas prefixed U were unconsecrated and therefore acceptable to the Jews. That covers about half the available area, and I'll just blank them in so that you can see how much of the cemetery was unconsecrated. But this was not ideal. The first attempt to procure some land was in 1856, when the town clerk reported a deputation of Jewish men had asked for a piece of ground next to the Welford Road Cemetery. The description of their request already had the seeds of failure within it. The committee had not before set aside an area for one particular religious group. The requirement for walls and fences was also an obstacle to any agreement. There is mention of a rabbi, although who this was is unclear. One of the committee mentioned that his neighbour had had to take his child to Birmingham for the burial. This referred to Joseph Fonseca, later Joseph, who had lost a son and a daughter prior to this request. The final sentence is interesting in that it claims that there were 16 Jewish families in the town. Most of the early records of the congregation were thrown away in an ill-judged clear-out, so we only have one side of the discussions which must have taken place following this request. The corporation minutes give us the official response in the following February of 1857. To summarise, the corporation was willing to allocate 1,200 square yards, allow fencing, but they wanted 50 shillings per interment, payable as required. Although the committee was optimistic, the negotiations failed. Although by the 1870s there was a considerable number of Jewish families, mostly from Russia, it was the Anglo Jews who led the initiatives, with one notable exception. Israel Hart of the Canterbury Harts was in a delicate position. He had gone into business with Joseph Levy of Pantechnicon fame and had been elected a borough councillor in 1874. He was later elected mayor 4 times and was High Bailiff of the borough in 1885. As an elected member of the corporation, he was not able, in public at least, to push for a burial ground. Newspapers continued to shine a light on the unsuccessful attempts to find a burial ground. In 1869, Nottingham complained that although they were only a small community, they were expected to bury the dead from Leicester, Derby and Nottingham. In 1885, an advert failed to produce any result. Then 3 years later, a Jew named Jonas Wolfe was found dead in a railway carriage after it had arrived at Leicester station. The station master had to ensure the safe custody of the body while trying to find where a burial could take place. This provoked a letter to the local paper expressing surprise that such a wealthy and respectable body of people as the Jews here still lacked their own burial ground. The title of this talk, "They Cannot Bestow a Grave," was a phrase used in this letter. In 1893, they came close again when a new municipal cemetery was planned, but the congregation wanted a legal right-of-way on the access road, and this was refused. Finally, 1899. Land on the northwest side of Leicester was designated as a new cemetery. Alec Finberg of the Wyvern Fountain Pen Company, honorary secretary of the 40-year-old Leicester Hebrew congregation, requested a section. An area sufficient for between 250 and 300 graves in a corner, enclosed and with a plain brick chapel was desired. The haggling went on for 12 months, at the end of which land was offered but rejected. The big guns were wheeled out. Israel Hart, by now Sir Israel Hart, became involved. 12 months later, it was finally agreed. And on the right-hand map, that little section there is the Jewish section. Google Earth shows the difference between the Jewish section and the rest of the cemetery. The area surrounded in red is the oldest section. The later extensions are to the southeast of the red rectangle. So Section A outlined in red was the original plot, used between 1902 and the 1940s. Section B reflects the growth in numbers and in the post-war years due to refugees and evacuees who arrived and stayed. The first burial was of Nina Rosina Berger, aged 13. The photograph is of her brother, Frank Louis Berger, sometimes Francesco Luigi Berger, his father being a native of Trieste. He was a volatile businessman, repeatedly bankrupt, dealing as a cigar merchant, general dealer, tailor, cigarette manufacturer in London and Leicester. Not to be confused with Francesco Berger, also from Trieste, the composer and friend of Tchaikovsky. Although from his photograph you might imagine this one was a composer. He has the look, he has the moustaches. The headstones initially were from the standard catalogues of the time. Floral decorations such as ivy was acceptable. Wreaths, cut down trees were a popular motif. An unexplained contrast with the graves of the consecrated areas is the absence of slate headstones, which are the norm in Leicestershire. The advantage of slate is that the inscription remains sharp for hundreds of years, but fortunately, most of the headstones at Gilrose are easily read. For the Heritage Lottery funded project into the Jewish section at Gilrose, we tried to find biographical information on everyone in the original section, less so for the post-war sections. These are some of the research volunteers at the Leicestershire Record Office at a training session. Research also enabled us to identify names for the unmarked graves. There were an awful lot of grassy plots with no indication at all. And we were able to make plaques and put them on, so each plot had a name. Everyone had their favourite research story. These are a few samples. Millie Dove, born in Vilna, came to Leicester, where her uncle owned a furniture shop where her father was employed. She would have spent her days as a furniture clerk, but for the advent of the First World War. Her brothers enlisted and she joined the VAD. Latterly at Woolwich, and then a limb fitting unit for amputees near Birmingham. In 1921, the various Jewish friendly societies finally agreed to fund a joint convalescent home at Birchington-on-Sea in Kent, and Millie was appointed as their first matron. Many of the patients were tailors admitted with bronchitis, reflecting poor housing and working conditions. It was a difficult job due to the intense scrutiny from all sides, but the home was viewed as a great success. Sadly, Millie suffered from kidney disease and she died aged 39. The society, the Convalescent Society, paid for and erected this stone. That what she died of was probably the same congenital condition that caused the early deaths of her father, 41, buried at Witton, and her sister Janie, aged 30, also buried at Gilrose. Adolf Zolkin Germains was a pleasure to research because he was so frequently in the newspapers. What I'm going to tell you now about Adolf is it's about a tenth of his story because it is very extensive. He arrived in the UK in the 1860s as a hat and cap maker called Aaron Simon Zolkin Germains. He married Emma Levitus in Birmingham, also a remarkable character. They went to the US as Arthur and Emma, musicians, and while there, Emma wrote a novel called, I love this, Left to Starve and No One Wants the Blame, which explored Jewish identity and assimilation and is still studied in America. Back in London, now a patent medicine seller, Adolf brought to a grateful public Notesco, I think it's Notesco, the most successful liniment in the world. There was a London launch with great fanfare to raise £60,000 capital, and later there was a US launch, and this is a certificate which the original is held at the Wellcome Collection in London. It's a share certificate. In 1883, they applied successfully to the Ladies' Committee of the Jewish Board of Guardians for the ticket costs to return to New York. Unfortunately, when they arrived, they were detained and expelled as destitute emigrants by the US government and sent back on the same boat. They seemed to bounce between the two countries over several years, Arthur becoming Adolf, sometimes with an E, sometimes without. The family increased in size to 8 children, but one son died of consumption, one drowned in the Thames, and a daughter died in a house fire. By 1891, Emma was in a care home and she died in an asylum in 1897. In 1890, he was banned from entering an exhibition hall where he had a stand to sell knapsack wine. This was due to the flower pot incident, which remains unexplained. But he was alleged to have threatened to shoot the manager and burn down the exhibition buildings. He abandoned patent medicine, turned his attention to domestic lighting. He patented a globaless chimney for oil and gas lights in Great Britain, France, Belgium and Germany. It gave off 50% more light, prevented smell and smoke, eliminated the risk of chimney breakage and saved the nation's rooms from soot damage. Although undoubtedly delivering every advantage claimed by its inventor, it was not a success and he was bankrupt in 1897. He was undaunted. Epitomising the adage to go big or go home, he patented a bigger version of the smoke-reducing chimney and proposed that by fitting it to the funnel of a seagoing ship, the owners would save on fuel, reduce the wages spent on stokers, enlarge the space for cargo, cut the amount of system cleaning required. He must have been the most persuasive of men, as there were sea trials of his invention on a Japanese war vessel, the Shikishima, in 1899. He ploughed on rather like a supertanker, unable to stop or turn. He married his housekeeper, and there were 4 more children. In 1906, his invention was trialled on SS Borussia, which led to the granting of a German patent for the smoke reducer. And then, finally, the picture. This photograph was at the National Archives, showing Adolf, I presume it must be him, up a ladder, pointing at his invention. And then silence. His final flourish was to be buried twice in cemeteries 20-odd miles apart. He was living near Church Gresley on the Leicestershire-Derbyshire border and is recorded in the York Road Cemetery list, interred 9 days after his death. Despite that, he is also recorded as buried at Gilrose, Section A, Row L, Plot 3. A mystery to the end. Leaving Adolf behind, we moved to the Second World War. Leicester had been the destination for both refugees and evacuees, seen as sufficiently distant from London to be safe. There were targets in the Midlands, and the local record office has German maps with such features as stations and aerodromes marked. One particular night in November 1940 saw a number of bombs dropped on Highfields, where the synagogue, not far from the station, was sited among large multi-occupancy houses. In the photograph on the left, the west side of the synagogue and the dome are visible, most of the damage being experienced only metres away. The burial plot at Gilrose commemorates 5 members of the Spiro family who died, and the table contains the names of those buried at Gilrose who died as a result of the raid in Leicester that night. Another refugee from London bombing raids was Samuel Cohen, who came with his mother from London's East End. He was a touring music hall entertainer, able to feed, sing, dance and assist on the piano. He was a childhood friend of John Logie Baird, the television pioneer, and before the war, in 1932, he was asked to appear in an experimental transmission of a live variety show. They were broadcast at the end of the evening in case there were technical problems. Every newspaper carried the listings for those fortunate few who had receivers. There were 1 or 2 unusual stones. The first is that of Herman Davidson, who died in 1934. It's unusual because it was an interment of ashes, the only case here that I've come across. The minister at the time had led the congregation since 1905, but the register shows that the minister did not attend, which was perhaps the compromise arrived at with the family. Kate Alyared's headstone reads, "Mourned by all her family." A visit to the Research Project website shows that she had 18 children in 25 years, of whom 15 grew to adulthood. It illustrates nicely how names for children change. The first 4 were standard for pre-World War I Jewish families: Annie, Israel, Benjamin, Rebecca. The last 4 were typical of 1920s England: Frank, Sylvia, Eileen and Dennis. And the third example is a Dorkin. So the cemetery was achieved and is still in use. In the absence of the written records, we can only guess why it took so long to succeed. The corporation was sympathetic, there were funds available, there were cemeteries being designed. I think the sticking point was the wish of the congregation to buy the land outright and then sell it plot by plot as required. This made it a private cemetery in the eyes of the corporation, which they were unwilling to countenance. Perhaps it was the persistence of Israel Hart, a seasoned political operator who was able to exert sufficient influence. Each successive section of the cemetery reflects the developing history of the congregation, adapting to each wave of arrivals. If you have Leicester connections, do pay a visit to the website of the project, and if we've made a mistake, do let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. And I might just stop you sharing your screen if that's okay, and we can see the various faces. I can figure out how to do that. Hang on a sec. Okay. Stop participant sharing. There we go. We're back in the room. So yes, as I said, thank you very much, Carol. Before we get to questions, I'd just like to call for a round of applause for Carol's presentation. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Okay. If you would like to ask a question, do feel free to raise your little electronic hand, which you do by going to the React menu and choosing Raise Hand. Or if you raise your physical hand, I'll do my best to find you in the room, as it were. Anne, do you want to start us off?
Hi, Carol. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. Thank you. I made a note of something you said as you were saying about the unmarked graves, and you said that research was undertaken to find out who was in them. Could you just sort of talk about how the research was undertaken? What resources did you have to, what records did you actually have access to?
The City Council has the original registers, and there are two registers. One is for Section S, which is the Jewish section, but they also had these giant registers for the entire Gilrose Cemetery, which is a vast cemetery, and you could cross-reference them, and so you were going backwards and forwards with plot numbers, and there is also an original map with every plot laid out and numbered. So it was just a case of going and to the office, which is actually in Gilrose Cemetery, and they would bring out these vast ledgers, and then we had put everything together, the original plot diagram, which showed individual plots, and the Section S, the Jewish registers, and then the total register. So we were blessed in that way. We were very sad that we lost every other record of the congregation before 1903 due to the over-enthusiastic clearing out. But I know you could weep. But yes, for the Gilrose, that was very, and we felt it was so important because for whatever reason, there was just grass there, grass and grass and grass, or mud and mud and mud. And you felt if you didn't find out the name of the person buried there and then go away and make them a little plaque with their name and dates on and put it there, you felt they'd been forgotten twice. And we couldn't allow it.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll go to Louise next. If I could ask you to unmute, Louise. There we go.
Hello. One absolutely wonderful talk. Thank you very much indeed. I'm helping a very good friend of mine, Paul Crendall, and I've just got the book out for my research. He's got a Cohen family that were buried at Gilrose. Do you have photographs of the headstones? This is in I've got 1943, 1929, 1992 was definitely Gilrose. Bertha Cohen, Solomon Cohen. 2 Cohens were born in Leicester, Carol and Shelley Cohen.
Sorry, if you give me, there was a 1940s one, did you say?
Yes, so 1943, Solomon Cohen died the 19th of June, 1943 in Leicester. I'm reading from his probate, and he lived at 37 High Street, Leicester. He died at the Royal Masonic Hospital, Ravens Court Park in London, and his widow was Caroline Cohen.
And he was, why was he buried in Leicester if he died in London?
No, I've got died. Oh, because of Leicester, he died.
I haven't got him buried in Gilrose.
Okay, so then I've definitely got Bertha Cohen.
Oh yes, I
She
knew
died
Bertha.
1st of February 1992, age 62 in Leicester.
Yes, her headstone will, if she was buried at Gilrose, then we've got photographs of all the headstones right up to date. Well, every so often we go up there and we sort of gather up any headstones that have appeared in the last sort of couple of years, and they get put onto the website. So definitely Bertha Cohen would be on there.
Do you know any living descendants of that Cohen family?
Yes.
Would you be able to put my friend in touch with them? Because Caroline Cohen, the widow of Solomon Cohen, who originally lived in Leicester, was originally Caroline Crendell.
Oh, I see. Yes, if you, I can give you my email, or
yeah, we can hook you up after the meeting, Louise, and if you send a question via me, I'll make sure it gets to Carol. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
There certainly are descendants of or she was married to Aubrey, I believe. Is
I haven't got that on this little bit of my book. It's probably my tree. I've got all on different pages. But obviously Solomon Cohen lived at 37 High Street, Leicester at the time. But obviously he died in London, but he did live in Leicester.
High Street is all shops, although in the early days they had they lived above the shops.
And Carol Cohen and Shelley Cohen were both born in Leicester in 1952 and 1957.
Yes, I went to Cada with Carol.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gosh, personal knowledge, amazing. Okay, we'll go to Marsha next. I could ask you to unmute. There we go.
Hi, thank you for an excellent talk, Carol.
Thank you.
I wondered if you could say any more about the wartime community in Leicester, because my mother and her family moved from London to Leicester during World War II.
Well, as I said, it was seen as a safe place, come to Leicester away from the bombs. And then unfortunately, we were in the sort of flight path of bombs, or if they were, we were quite near Coventry and there was a station. So it didn't work out so well. There was, when did they survive the war?
Yes.
Oh, good. The website, the Jewish Gilrose website, is a good place to start. What sorts of things would you like to know?
Well, how big the community was during wartime. I mean, did it grow a lot?
Yes, it was. Certainly, it reached its greatest numbers when with the influx of the German refugees, the Austrian, the Czech refugees, and also the people coming to Leicester, and then they stayed, had children, and that was, I think, the point at which the communal hall was required, because the shul couldn't accommodate all the people who were required places. So yes, it did swell to considerable numbers. If Aubrey wishes to jump in. I don't know if you'd like to. Would you like to, Aubrey? If you,
You're on mute. Or,
Yes,
there we go.
I'm now in. Yeah, at one stage there were perhaps three different Jewish congregations in Leicester. There was the old time residents who've been there for umpteen years. There were the German Jews who came in, who were known as the Bei Unsers, because they always used to say we always did it different in Germany. By uns we did it this way, etc., etc. There was another group of extremely Orthodox living in the west side of Leicester under Rabbi Dunner, who was sometimes close to the community and sometimes not. And there was, I believe, also a group of Belgian Jewish refugees who formed a little clique. No, it was a very, very wide community with umpteen variations of societies. There were at least three different women's Zionist societies when I came to Leicester in '59. And if you're interested, as far as the Cohens are concerned, Aubrey Cohen lived in the house which I bought from him in Stanley Road in Leicester, and I've been there ever since. So but thank you very much, Carol, for reminding me of some of the work that we did together.
it was a very great experience. I enjoyed it tremendously.
I think it's fair to say that we had an editorial committee of 4 people, and at the end of the work, we'd all read and criticized each other's work, and we were still talking. The booklet was published.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Aubrey and Carol. We'll go to Joel next.
Yeah, Carol, thank you very much for your very interesting talk. Just 2 things. First of all, Jeanette, thank you for posting the link to the website there, where I can see, I've just seen that you can see the gravestones. But just a question, Lee, does that connect automatically to, can we search that via the JCR UK or the Jewish Gen Joba, or do you need to know that website?
You can,
and if not, can we add that link to the JCR UK, because it would be quite useful, because unless you know that website, we're not going to find the graves, I don't think.
I find that when I put in, unless it's just my computer's used to me always going to Jewish Gilrose, when I put in just a name or a phrase or something which occurs on the website, it pops up as the first search term. Lee would know. Is that because my computer knows I go there quite often?
No, I think the problem is, Carol, that your target audience is probably someone in a completely different country who's never heard of Gilrose, never heard of Leicester, and they just want to search for Shmuley Cohen, and it suddenly pops up. So in order to drive people to the Gilrose website, it really pays to get them involved in one of the JOBAR or JCR UK burial databases. And even if eventually it will end up in Gilrose, it means that you'll get to that whole class of people that just never even knew they might have had relatives in England or Leicester. And it does crop up quite a bit. So we can certainly help you with that if the organizers of your project want to make themselves found by more people. Not everyone does, but quite a lot do. And, most people, if they're maybe even new to Jewish genealogy, the first thing they'll do is go to Jewish Gen, put a name in, and just do a search. And then suddenly that's when they'll find the cemeteries, they'll find other records in other countries, and it should drive more traffic to your website.
I'm not sure whether it isn't already on the JCR page for Leicester. I didn't know whether to
I'll
go.
check it out for you also then. So yeah, thank you for that, Lee, because I just think it would be useful for other people to find you easier. So, and the other thing, Carol, I saw you put a slide up with somebody with the Fonseca surname.
Yes.
So I thought, I know this name. So I was busy searching, but I see somebody from my extended family married a Fonseca. I think it was in the Nottingham area, and they changed the surname to Bentley. So I don't know if you know about some Fonsecas changing the name to Bentley. So
it's interesting that both branches of the family chose to get rid of the Fonseca name, although they didn't choose the same options to go to.
So yeah,
But that was a very rare example where I actually found a newspaper announcement where Joseph Fonseca announced he was going to call himself Joseph. Normally they did a name change and it wasn't formal like that. So that was I'm grateful to him for putting it in the paper for me.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's hope it wasn't indicative of some family scandal, but you
Like
can never tell when there's a Bruegger's. Over to you, Jeanette. Do you have a question?
Yeah, well, or a thing that I was going to say. What I was going to do was offer, if assuming Carol is happy, to double check that the link is on JCR UK and also on Joba as well, to sort of double check to make sure the links are there. Because kind of Nolan has twisted my arm very, very hard after his talk the other week on Holocaust records and on the Jewish Gen burial registers pages to make sure that I'm putting as many shared links on as I possibly can. So if you are happy, I will make sure that the links are in both places, because the JCR UK webmaster David Schulman is also used to getting at least 3 emails a week from me with different links to add things there.
Well, it's not up to me to say yay or nay on that because it's not my website. So I'll pass that request along to.
Oh, okay. Although there's nothing to stop anybody spotting a website and adding a link to it when they spot it.
No, adding a link is one thing, but obviously if you're going to put the data into a different format on Jewish Gen, that would need proper licensing agreements in place. So that doesn't just take place without a great deal of thought.
Yes.
Good. Sounds good.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Okay. Any more questions for Carol? Looking around for hands. Don't see any electronic or physical ones, in which case I'll just ask for another round of applause for Carol for answering all of our questions and again for today's talk. Thank you, Carol.
Yeah, sorry about the technical problems.
We got there in the end, don't worry.
After a fashion.
Okay, everyone. I think what we're going to do now is take a 15-minute break. So after the break, there is a chance of having an Anglo-Jewish workshop that isn't specific to Carol's topic, but if you'd like to ask any questions about Anglo Jewry, we have a few experts in the room, such as Gina and Joel and Jeanette and probably Anne, so Sharon as well, I think. So if anyone wants to ask a question or share any recent successes, we'd be delighted to hear. But if we can meet back here at 3:20, which is in about 15 minutes, get yourself a coffee, and if no one comes back, we will end the meeting. But it's usually a lot of fun, and hope to see you in 15 minutes. Thanks, everyone.